All right, guys. Did anybody do the mission from last week, which was to read the end of chapter 26? Yo, no. Lillian. Okay, Lillian, can you fill us in? What happens after what we looked at the beginning of chapter 26? Oh, hold on. Lillian.
There's a partial war of the well, and
Yeah, I mean, it was essentially that. It was like a partial war over the wells. Remember, the Philistines kicked Isaac out of the land because, well, not you, Isaac, the other Isaac. They kicked Isaac out of the land, though, because he became so wealthy and powerful, and they were afraid of him. And so they stopped up all the wells. Then they dig some of them up. And then Isaac goes from here to here to here to here, and he keeps finding fights with people. And eventually they get to a place where he's able to dig a well and get water, and he names it Rehoboth, which just means that the Lord made room for us. Right? So they're going about as wanderers throughout this land. They're not fighting the Philistines. They're just looking for a place where they can dig a hole to find water. Right? And so then they find this place, and the Lord blesses them with it, and then the Lord appeared to him, and then he cuts a covenant with Abimelech. They reconcile after all of this has ended. It's actually really fascinating. So you remember how Abimelech was mad at him? Well, at the end of chapter 26, Abimelech and Isaac reconcile to one another and make a covenant to one another. Okay, there's a lot we can learn from Isaac about what it looks like to make peace with those around us, even those that don't like us. Okay, so tonight we're going to be in chapter 27. All right, and your mission is going to be to read the end of chapter 27. Okay, so last week was read the end of chapter 26. This week is to read the end of chapter 27. There you go. All right. And it actually gets really interesting. So, Lillian, will you go to our first slide, which I think is just this? Okay. Here's what I want to do tonight. I know it's 29 verses. They read pretty quick, though. Okay. And so I would like us to read all 29 of them up front, and then we're going to make some observations as we go. So here's what I want you to do. As we're reading, as you're listening, as you're hearing, if something stands out and is really interesting to you, I want you to save that and mark it so that when we get to the point where we're talking about this, you bring it up, right? So if you find something in the text that you're like, man, what in the world, that's cool, or why is that way, bring it up, okay? So let's do it this way. Would anybody want to read through verse 10? I saw Hayden's hand first. Would anybody like to take 11 through 20? I saw Rose's next. Perfect. Can somebody take 21 to 29?
You got it, Charlie.
I saw Graham. Graham was ready, dude. I'm going to let Graham take that one. By the way, I told the middle schoolers, when you get to Esau's name, it's really easy to remember his name. Esau saw a seesaw, okay? Okay, you're welcome. We got that out of the way. Hayden, go ahead. All right. Thank you, Graham. So, the objective I gave to you, right? What stands out? What's happening here? Katie.
there are lots of lies.
Yeah, lots of lies, right? From who? Jacob. From Isaac the father? Or are you thinking of Jacob? Jacob, yeah.
The son.
The son, Jacob, right? A lot of lies from Jacob. Who else said it? Rebecca? Yeah, Rebecca's in on this. Lillian? Rebecca lied to the son, right? Like there's a whole lot going on here, right? Now, we talked about this last time with Jacob, okay? Jacob and Esau, when they were in the womb together, and then she was giving birth to them, what happens? He grabbed his brother's heel, and his name literally became supplanter, which means to deceive and to take over, right? So from the very beginning, Jacob has been a deceiver of sorts, and now we're kind of seeing Jacob's deception on full display. But it's not just Jacob, right? It's also Rebecca, his mom, okay? So we're seeing a lot of that going on here. Anything else that stands out to you guys? Yeah, I mean, Isaac is trying to bless his child. So he's coming to him for a blessing. You remember, does anybody remember what happened with the birthright? Jacob and Esau and the birthright? Yeah, Esau traded it away for a bowl of soup, right? And it was because Jacob demanded it of him. Esau came to him and said, I'm hungry, I'm starving, I need something to eat. And so Jacob said, well, here, I've got a bowl of soup. Give me your birthright and I'll let you eat. Right? So even in that moment, is the intention of Jacob's heart really something that is admirable? Not really, right? Because he's asking his brother, hey, give up the very thing that when you were born was supposed to be promised to you. So in the ancient world, this is what would happen, right? Let's say my father was a king, and I was born, and I was given a birthright that one day I'm going to become the king after he passes along, or after he can't be king anymore. So I'm born with this birthright, and then eventually near the end of my father's life, or when he's getting ready to hand over the reins of the family name and the kingdom to me, what does he do? Gives me a blessing. That's what's happening here. You guys saw that, right? Isaac was in his old age. Some people think Isaac was probably like 170 years old at this point. Okay, and Jacob and Esau maybe about 70 years old. So a lot of time has passed by in this one page that I flip in my Bible. Okay? So a lot of times passed by. Isaac's a very old man, and he says, I don't know the day of my death, but essentially what that means is I'm about to die. Right? So come here. I want to bless you. And what does he tell Esau to do? To go get him game, to go hunt, right? Told him to go hunt and bring back his favorite dish from him. So Esau goes out and does that, and then the deception kind of sets in, right? Anything else that stands out? Any observations about what we can make from the text? How does, go ahead, Peyton.
Rebecca's influence on Jacob, or like the mother's influence on a child.
Yeah. So Rebecca, that's the interesting thing here, right? It wasn't that Jacob initiated this and went to Isaac. It was Rebecca who initiated it, overhearing Isaac talk about this, and then went to her son. Does anybody remember why that might be the case? Like, why do you think she would have done that? Why would she go against her husband? Because remember, they're married. Why would she go against her husband and ask the older son or the younger son to do this? Favoritism. Okay. Maybe. A little bit of that. Not exactly what I'm looking for, but maybe a little bit of that. Hayden? Yeah, I mean, so what we know about Esau is that he was a really skilled hunter, right? And so there's probably some favor that Isaac really had for Esau because of his ability to hunt and bring home stuff and cook really good food, right? So there's probably a little bit of that going on. There's something I'll hit on in a minute, so I'm just going to let that kind of be out in the air for a little bit, okay? Y'all got anything else? If not, I'll move on and kind of walk you through what I saw. Parker?
Like, I understand the whole blessing part, like you had to bless your firstborn, but is it kind of like they get 100% of everything, and that's where like the jealousy came into account?
It doesn't exactly say, but look at what the blessing consisted of. Does it sound familiar? Yeah, and it's the same one that was passed on to Isaac, right? God is carrying on the covenant that he made with Abraham through this family. And so this blessing came with the covenant that God initiated with their forefathers, with his dad and then granddad, okay? Anything else?
The blessing reminds me also of what God said to Cain after he killed his brother Abel.
Ooh, yeah, okay.
I might be completely off, but yeah.
Yeah. No. So there's something to that. That's a good observation. Go back and see how that translates.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like how it's kind of similar to Cain and Abel versus Jacob and Esau.
Yeah, I mean, like there's another rivalry happening here, right? Okay. You guys are really pushing us along to what I want to get to. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip forward a slide, okay? You guys are starting to see some really cool stuff in this chapter, okay? So number one, Isaac's getting ready to bless Esau. Talked about that, what the blessing is, why it mattered with the birthright. Rebekah's plot to deceive old Isaac. Can somebody go back to Genesis 25, verse 23 and read that out loud for us real quick? It's one page over. You got it? Go ahead.
The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the serve the younger.
All right, so who's he talking to? Who's the Lord talking to? Talking to Rebekah, okay? This is before Jacob and Esau are born, and the promise is what? That there are two nations in your womb. Who's going to rule over the other one? The younger is going to rule over the older one, right? And so, did Isaac forget about this promise? Because look, if it's been 70 years since this promise was given to where they are now, I guarantee you at some point him and Rebekah were sitting down having dinner, and she mentioned to him, hey, by the way, the Lord told me that Jacob is supposed to get the blessing and is going to rule over his brother. Okay? So, I mean, I'm sure at some point Isaac knew this, but what did verse 1 say about Isaac? Like, where is he at in his life right now? Yeah, he's old. He's about to die. It even says his eyes were too dim to see. So he's starting to lose one of our major senses here, right? Okay? So he forgets. Now, I want to mention this too, about Rebekah. Would God's promise that Jacob was going to be the one to carry on the blessing, would that have still happened even if she didn't deceive Isaac? Yeah, obviously, right? God is a God who makes promises and keeps them. Did Rebekah need to step into this situation? She didn't need to. So there's something really interesting that we're seeing happen here with Rebekah and Jacob, is that they did something they really shouldn't have done, but God still worked through what they did, right? Because they were a part of the covenant that God made. God was promising things to them and their future generations. And so because of that, despite what they did, God was still faithful. Isn't that interesting? He's all-knowing, He's all-powerful, He's sovereign and in control. But He still lets His people do dumb things sometimes, and He works through them for the sake of what's good for us. Okay? Now, the middle schoolers asked a really interesting question at this point that I think is worth bringing up. Is it always wrong to deceive, though? I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer deceived in World War II. The spies deceived in Jericho when they went in. Is it always wrong to deceive? Not necessarily, right? I mean, those spies that went into Jericho, God instructed them to do that, right? And so if they're obeying God over man, it's not really a sin that they went in and did that. But in this situation with Rebekah, again, did she need to do this? Did God instruct her to do this? No, right? Yes, ma'am.
I feel like it's only really okay to deceive, like God tells you to, or God works through you to deceive, because He has better plans and purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's use Dietrich Bonhoeffer for an example here, okay? Because if we're going to apply this to our life, we need to think kind of clearly about this too, okay? He did not have a specific instruction from the Lord other than to make no peace with evil, right? And some of the other New Testament commands. Is what he did a sin? It's really tough to say one way or the other, but we know that behind the scenes, he was trying to work towards something good and not something evil, right? And so even here with Rebekah, do you think Rebekah's intentions were, I need to deceive my husband because I hate him before he dies and I want him to feel pain? No. She probably remembered the blessing that God gave to her and promised to her through Jacob and was trying to make that happen, right? Again, though, she didn't have to do that.
I think that's a really big assumption to make. I really do.
What is?
Maybe she recognized the promise and was thinking, oh, I'm just going to take it into my own hands.
Sure.
Maybe it was just out of favoritism.
I mean, it could have been. There's no doubt. It could have been out of favoritism too. But obviously, somewhere along the way, either Isaac or him and Rebekah both forgot about the promise that God made, right? Somebody forgot about the promise, and because somebody forgot about the promise, God stepped in and let them do something dumb. Whether it's He let her show favoritism or she was trying to deceive him so that she can make the blessing come through, right? So, yeah, big assumption to make, but either way that we look at it, right? God is still the one moving forward in this. So, good point, though. Good point. So then Jacob's deceptive scheme. How does he deceive Isaac? What does he do? Yeah, because Esau was a hairy man and Jacob was a smooth man, right? Yeah, you see Parker with the shoulders there? I love it.
What did I do?
Nothing. Don't worry about it. I saw it. Nobody else did. But yeah, so Esau was a hairy man. Isaac is blind at this point in his life. So that means he has to rely on what? Feeling, smelling, hearing, right? All of his other senses. And so Jacob wants to deceive Isaac, and the only way to do that is to appear like Jacob. And you can see Isaac doesn't even trust that it's really him at first, does he? Because what does he say? Are you really my son? What you got?
You called it Jacob's deceptive scheme, but originally he didn't even know it was a scheme.
Sure.
Rebecca lied to him at first and said, "Oh, it's just for this meal." And then later, she said, when he asked about it, she said, "No, just follow my orders. Don't say anything." And then he took part in the scheme. It wasn't his scheme at first.
Well, it wasn't, but he joined in, didn't he? So it may not have been his scheme at first, but Isaac offered him 2 chances. Did y'all catch this? He offered him 2 chances to back out of this. Right? The first one was when he said, "Are you really my son?" Right? He had the opportunity there, or my son Esau. "Are you really my son Esau?" He had the opportunity to say, "No, I'm actually Jacob. I don't know what's going on. Mom told me to come in here and say this," right? Like something to that effect, okay? But then he also asked again, he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" After asking him already, right? Both times Jacob still decided, you know what, yeah, I'm actually Esau. I'm gonna go forward in this. Make sense? But good question though, Lillian. That was an awesome one. Okay, so he appears like somebody else, puts on the sheepskin, very hairy guy now, puts on his clothes and he smells like him, okay? There was the escape opportunity, and then eventually what happens? Let me just get to this real quick and I'll come back to you, okay? Isaac blesses him, gives him the blessing. The thing that God promised to Rebekah came true, even if it came through this deception and lying and the sinfulness of man. God's still working through our issues, right? Pretty neat. What was your point?
I was gonna say, like, Jacob was really bold for going through with it. Like you said, like there's escape opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, like Isaac literally said, "You do not sound like my son Esau," and also like
Yeah.
you would think Isaac would remember what like sheep wool like and stuff felt like.
Maybe, but at the same time, if you're in Isaac's shoes, are you expecting your other son to come in wearing sheepskin?
No, but he did question him twice.
He did question him twice, right? So there's something to be said here, though, about the fact that Isaac, I mean, at this point in his life, he had to trust the Lord. And so whatever happened was happening. He thought it was Esau. And what you're going to see, if you go home and read the rest of this chapter, you're going to see something really interesting. It looks like Isaac is okay with the fact that it was Jacob and not Esau, because he thought that it was going to happen his way. He thought the way that this blessing is going to be passed on is going to be through Esau. My son, my oldest one, the one that probably obeyed him more than Jacob did. I don't know, right? But God did not desire it that way. So it came about through Jacob. Okay, so that's essentially what happens here. What you got, Zach?
I'm just thinking, like, how could he not tell from the voice, though?
Well, he said that. He said it. What verse is it? Is it verse 20? No. 22. He came close and he felt him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." But it says he didn't recognize him. So, again, he was questioning him a couple of times here, and Jacob was essentially taking advantage of his old father. Right? That's the other issue here that we see, right? Aiden?
I think kind of to answer that question, like he probably felt Jacob's like physical appearance.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe to his mind, it's like, well, his voice is something that can be changed, like manipulated, but the physical appearance, you can't do that. And it could have just been out of like desperation for the meal. You know what I mean?
It could have been. It could have been that he didn't trust his hearing anymore. I mean, his eyesight's already gone, right? Maybe he didn't trust his hearing. I don't know. We can't pull all the assumptions into the text like that. But what we do know is this family's messed up, guys. I mean, we're halfway through Genesis. Are you starting to see it now? This family is wild. Why would the Messiah come through this family? Right? Like, we've already seen all the lying. We've seen some really inappropriate relationships. It doesn't make sense. But I'll put it to you this way. God chose his family. Had he chosen another family, whether it was a family from Russia or wherever it was, right? Had he chosen another family, I know, I'm just throwing that out there, Parker. It doesn't matter. That family would have been messed up too. Because all of our families are just like this family. We may not sin the same way that they did, but I promise you, your family is just as messed up as this family is. And so God promised salvation to the entire world through this one family, and then he was the faithful one here, wasn't he? It didn't depend on Jacob's obedience, did it? No. It depended on God's promise that he made and the covenant he cut with Abram back in Genesis chapter 15. So let's move forward to our second question, Lily, which is this. Again, despite the sinfulness of man, there's this repeating pattern that keeps coming back. Where does God continue to just give and give and give so abundantly that it's almost as if he doesn't even see the sin, he's just blessing anyways? I saw Zach saying first.
It reminds me of the covenant that he gave to Abraham. It just continues to bless him and family for generations.
And you know what's interesting about some of these covenants so far? We've seen the covenants come, or at least the reminders of the covenant through the blessing here. We've seen this stuff come right after some really terrible things, haven't we? Or right after a major downfall in somebody's life. It's almost like God sees it and he's trying to remind them, hey dummy, like flicking them on the back of the head. I'm trying to change you because I'm going to use you, right? So let's grow up together. It's pretty interesting. You were next.
My little cop-out is he could have killed everybody that sinned.
I mean, he could have. I mean, seriously, that's the thing. Jacob could have died for his lying here. But he didn't. Instead, God let Isaac bless him, and the promise that he gave to Rebekah came to be true, didn't it? Again, that's what I'm saying. Even though it was through sin, God still worked in it. God still accomplished good things through it because he's faithful.
He also could have found a loophole. He fulfilled his promise, and then after he fulfills it, immediately smites him.
Yeah, absolutely. Could have done that, no doubt. Peyton.
I was going to say that, God gave Rebekah the ability to come up with the plan to deceive Isaac in the first place, and also
Sure.
the opportunity to actually pull through with it and keep
Yeah,
Esau away long enough so that
yeah. I mean, she is a thinking, reasoning person made in the image of God. She had the ability to come up with something very clever. And then other than that, the opportunity came about because what happens? The Lord saw fit that if this is how they were going to do it, we're going to make it happen. And so what does he do? Isaac sends away Esau to go and hunt. And while he's out hunting, they scheme and do their thing and then deceive Isaac. And then Isaac gives a blessing away, right? The opportunity was there. God obviously had his hand on it because he's sovereign. Nothing happens without him ordaining it to pass, okay? It doesn't mean that he authors evil. It just means that he knew this was going to happen and he was going to work good through it, right? So 100%, 100%, okay? What about the rivalry between Jacob and Esau? Did God give him that? Maybe a little bit, right? I mean, he said it was going to happen in the promise in the womb. You're going to have two nations against each other, and then the younger one is going to rule over the older one, right? Again, all of this is God just orchestrating a good thing to come to pass, even if it doesn't look like it in the moment, okay? So go to our next question. Yeah, go to our next question. What marks of wisdom or lack thereof do we see in this passage? There's a lot going on here, right? Peyton.
you can tell that Rebekah and Jacob, they both spoke carefully. It may not have been in the way of wisdom, but they spoke carefully in order to deceive Isaac.
Yeah. And again, we can't speak to the intentions of Rebekah's heart. But I don't think that Jacob's intentions were the same as Rebekah's, right? And so Rebekah's intentions may have been the thing that, speaking carefully here, was wise. But in Jacob's life, probably not, because the attitude wasn't there too. Wisdom's not just doing stuff, right? Wisdom is having the attitude that says, I agree joyfully with doing what God says is right. So I think so. Absolutely, both of them spoke carefully, but I think one of them had an intention that was different than the other one. Parker, I saw you next.
Two things. The first one is like talking about like Jacob and Rebecca. I don't think Jacob necessarily knew that the blessing was solely for his older brother. So because he didn't have like the full picture, he was like easily deceived in that.
Sure.
So yeah, he spoke carefully, but he really didn't have like an opportunity to fight against like what Rebecca was saying. Also, the second thing is like trusting in God's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, this would just be Rebecca because the promise was made to her, and she took it into her own power to complete the promise,
Yeah.
rather than relying on like the Lord's plan.
Well, possibly, right? I mean, you're the one that said we can't make the assumption about this earlier.
I'm just saying, like,
So,
I'm looking at her actions.
maybe,
I'm
yeah.
looking at her actions.
But totally valid to say, like, maybe she just trusted that the Lord's promise, I mean, she remembered it and wanted to see it come to pass, right?
In her own power, instead of the Lord's power. That was my claim.
That's fair. That's fair.
That was my claim.
All right. You defined it.
I think Jacob manages his resources pretty good.
Sure. No doubt.
Go ahead, Kara.
No doubt. Did he steal yours, Kara? You go ahead, though.
I was gonna say again with like Peyton like speaking carefully and stuff. Like I think Isaac spoke carefully because he gave like Jacob a way to opt out more than once and like kept like disproving why he's not Esau. And he was
Sure.
like, you know what? I'm gonna trust in God.
Sure.
And just say sure, whatever.
No doubt, right? Like whatever happens. And like I said, go home and read the end of this chapter because what you're going to find is that I think you're going to see Isaac is okay with what happens, even though it's a little weird and he doesn't seem to understand why it happened. He's okay with it, right? But
Managing his resources, like Jacob and Rebecca managed the resources of the game she already had.
100%. And here's the thing. What we're seeing with Jacob, though, even though he's 70 years old, this is one of the first times in Genesis that he's come into the main picture of Scripture, okay? What we're seeing from Jacob right now is the same thing that we saw of Abraham in Genesis 12. We're seeing a very young and immature and unwise guy. This is the pattern that God has shown this family, though. He's taking these immature and young men, and through these different situations he puts them in. Again, God ordained this to happen for a reason, and eventually some fallout is going to come to Jacob's life because of this, okay? But God allowed this to happen because the pattern He's shown His forefathers is that through your failures and then through my promises and my encouragement, I'm going to take you from the immature, unwise guy into a place where it doesn't matter what I tell you to do. You are going to trust me because I've proven to you how faithful I am. You learn from your mistakes, and then God shows you that He is the faithful one, right? That's why in Genesis 22, Abraham believed that the only way in which that God would have him kill Isaac is that He would raise him from the dead. He trusted Him. Even though he couldn't understand what was happening, He still took him up to Mount Moriah, right? So eventually we'll see some of that in Jacob's life, but right now we're just starting out with this 70-year-old man who's very unwise. And so it's a really interesting passage. Okay, last question. Then we got to get to scooting. Where do we see the gospel in this? Like, how do we see redemption through this passage? Any ideas?
The covenant.
Okay, yeah, so there's a reaffirmation of the covenant and the blessing, right? Now, it doesn't come from God, okay? But it does come from the one passing on the blessing who's taking over the family now, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, definitely the covenant. There's something a little sneaky in here that I think is very fun. But if you don't have an idea, I'll show it to you. You got an idea?
God keeps His promise.
Yeah, okay. God keeps His promise. Again, this family's nuts, right? But God is still being faithful and He's carrying on the promise. Here's what it is. You can write these down. Lily, can you go to the next one? Thank you. You can write them down. I'm not going to have us look there because we're out of time. I'll just tell you what they say. Isaiah chapter 61, there's a promise here that essentially says one day you are going to wear robes of righteousness, right? The robes of righteousness are going to be put onto you. Colossians chapter 3, verse 3 says that if you belong to Christ, you are hidden in Him. Why do we put a robe on? It's to hide everything underneath it, right? If you're in Christ, I need you to see this, you put on His robes of righteousness. That way when you go before the Father, just like Jacob went before Isaac, who does he see? The older brother. He sees the brother who was faithful. He sees the brother who did what his father asked him to do. He sees the brother that the father loved. When you and I believe in Christ and receive the gospel, this is what happens. We're like Jacob, where we put on the sheepskin, but it's Christ's. And so when we go to the Father, He sees us and He says, that's my son. That's not Graham, that's not Parker, that's not Peyton, that's not Chloe, right? That's my son, Christ, and all of the goodness and perfectness that He was and is. So when you believe the gospel and receive this in your life, number one, you put on these robes and you receive the blessing, and then God is going to take you from this place where Jacob is right now. Because truthfully, for a lot of us, we're probably still mimicking Jacob in a lot of ways, aren't we? He's going to take us from where we are right now, and He is going to work in our lives in such a way that He's going to bring us to this new place. Okay? That's what His promise is. And then eventually one day He's going to return and everything's going to be perfect and amazing. But until then, He's molding you and shaping you into something different. So, I love this passage. Do y'all see why Genesis is one of my favorite books now? It's so crazy. It's wild. This family's nuts. I'm telling you. It is. It is. So your mission, guys, is to read the rest of this chapter, okay? We'll talk about it next week. But let me pray for us, and then we need to get out of here, okay? Father, I thank You for Your word. I thank You for passages like this where You're real and honest with us about who You've chosen to work through. We thank You for the encouragement to know that we don't have to be any better than Jacob. We don't have to be any better than who we are. You meet us where we're at, and You intend to change us. So we thank You for that, and thank You for Christ, and we ask that this week we would honor You and honor each other with everything we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, people.